Hi everyone, today we're talking about simple interest, more applications of percents. When you borrow money from a bank or a credit card company, you pay interest for the use of the institution's money. Simple interest is one type of fee paid for the use of money. Now, there's two types of interest here that we're looking at. Interest that you would have to repay the bank, and also there's interest that you can earn by putting your money into a bank. So interest can be a reward for keeping your money with an institution, or it can be a payment because you borrowed money from somebody over a period of time, a little extra they can recoup because you've borrowed it from them. In the problems we're looking at, we're going to do very simple interest. And our formula is I equals PR and T, where I stands for the interest. It is the amount of interest earned or accumulated. The principal is the original amount put into the bank or the original amount of money that was borrowed. R is your annual interest rate, and I do want to make a note here. It is a percentage, so let's say it is 6%. When you go to put that into your equation, anytime you're using a percent in an equation, it should be converted to decimal form, 0.06. So just make sure that that happens. When you're putting your rate in there, it's in decimal form. And then lastly, the T represents the time that it has been taken out or it has stayed in the bank in the amount of years. It must be in years. And PRT, when you have letters right beside each other, that implies multiplication. So we're going to go ahead and try a couple problems using this, and there's all kinds of different examples. I'm just going to do a couple with you. The first thing we would encourage you to do is to write down all of your variables on the side so that you can fill in what pieces of information you were given. So I'm looking for interest, the principal, the rate, and the time. So you can pull out any of these at any point because right now we're just identifying them. So Ben decided to buy a living room set, a couch, chair, and coffee table, and had to borrow $2,500 for 3 years at an annual simple interest rate of 6%. How much interest will he pay if he pays the entire loan off at the end of the third year? So we have all kinds of information they've given us. He borrowed the $2,500. That's the principal. That's how much he originally borrowed. 3 years is the time, and 6% is the rate, which means we're missing the interest. Okay. Now, I'm going to substitute all of these pieces in, I equals PRT, into our equation. The interest we don't know, so we're going to leave that blank. We'll just leave it as the letter or the variable that was given to us. Principal was $2,500, and I prefer to put parentheses around everything because parentheses beside a number implies multiplication. It's just easier for me to keep track. The rate is 6%, so remember what I told you about the rate. It has to be written as the decimal form, and then time, 3 years. Now this one's very straightforward. You are going to multiply those three numbers together, 2,500 times 0.06 times 3, and I got 450. What does that tell us? That's the interest that he has to pay back in addition to how much he has borrowed. So that was the answer of the first question, 450. And then it says, what is the total amount he will repay? Well, he has to pay back what he borrowed, 2,500, plus the 450 in interest that was accrued over time. So he has to pay back for the couch, chair, and coffee table that originally cost $2,500. He has to now pay back $2,950. In the next example, we're going to do the same process. We're going to have our I. This just keeps you so organized. I would highly encourage you to organize yourself before you dive into the problem. It's like your training wheels. Joshua invested $8,000 in a bond at PNC Bank at a yearly rate of 2.5%. Over that amount of time, he earned $1,600 in interest. How long was his money invested? So, first number I come across is $8,000. That's how much he started with. He invested, meaning he put this money in a bank. The yearly rate was 2.5%. And the interest he earned over that time was $1,600. 1600. Means we're missing the time. Let's go ahead and write down our equation, I equals PRT. And we have our interest, that was 1600. Our principal was 8 grand. Remember, I'm using my parentheses here. The rate was 2.5%. So if when I move the decimal twice, it's 0.025. And then the time is just t, because we're not sure how long it was. So to solve the equation, just like we've been doing all year, I'm going to multiply the 8 grand times 0.025. That gets me 200 times t. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. I want to divide by 200. You guys should be so good at solving equations by now. 1600 divided by 200, which is 8. So t is 8, the time. What does 8 mean? Well, 8 is the years, 8 years. Our next example, we're going to do I equals PRT. We have another person doing some improvements, bought a new home and decided to make home improvements, including redoing the kitchen. He borrowed 12 grand for 4 years. At the end of the 4 years, he repaid a total of $14,400. That's interesting. We haven't encountered a total before, so we're going to look at that in a moment. What was the original interest rate? So the first part, he borrowed $12,000. That's originally what he borrowed. That's the P. The principal for 4 years. That's easy. That's the time. Now, the other number that was given to us was $14,400, but it says it's the total. It didn't say it was the interest. So now I have to think. A total is going to have the original amount and the interest. So how do I get the interest from those two numbers? Well, I've got to subtract. So I'm going to take 14,400 minus 12,000. This is going to give me 2,400, which is the interest. That's the additional money that was repaid because he borrowed it. And now we're looking for R, because it's not good to have two blanks. That's not going to help us. We only need one number that's missing. So once again, we have I equals PRT. The interest is 2,400. That's what we just found. The principal was 12,000. We don't know the rate, so I'll put R. And then the time was 4 years. We'll multiply the 12,000 times the 4. That'll give us 48,000 times the rate equals 2,400. And then we're going to divide by 48,000. It will be a decimal. It should be a decimal. .05, which is 5%. When we talk about a rate, we do want to talk about it back in percent form, so we need to take the decimal, which is 0.05, and recognize that multiplying it by 100 makes it 5%. Big idea here was you had to subtract. When it said total, you had to subtract to get your interest. That will reappear again, hint, hint. Okay. The last one, we have a little graph that goes along with it. Doesn't make it harder, it just makes the problem have some different elements to it. Scenario 1, an investment of $1,800 will earn $126 over 2 years. Find the rate in the scenario. So I equals PRT. 1,800 is the investment, that's the principal. Even though investment starts with I, it means principal. It earns $126. That is the interest over 2 years. So we don't know the rate, but the time is 2 years. 1,800 times 2, 3,600 R, so, and 126. So then we're going to divide by 3,600. It should be a decimal, remember, because we're dealing with rate. My decimal is 0.035, which makes it 3.5%. It's easy enough. Now the next one relies on the graph. It says, find the interest over 2 years from the graph given and then find the interest rate. Instead of R, we'll call it Q just so there's a differentiator of the scenario. We would recommend any place that there is a cross, so that you can see a crosshair, okay? On the y-axis, you'll see the simple interest. On the x-axis, you'll see the investment, which just means principal. So we're going to have I equals PQT, since they said replace the R with the Q, just for this problem. The interest, I'll use the first dot here. The interest was 90. The principal at that point was 1,000. We don't know Q, so we'll leave that be. And the time, they already told us, was over 2 years, times 2. So 2 times 1,000 would be 2,000. And then we're going to divide both sides by 2,000. So 90 divided by 2,000 is 0.045. That's going to equal Q, which is 4.5%. Then they have a follow-up question. Which interest rate is larger and by how much, comparing the R and Q? Well, Q is larger. Q is larger because it's 4.5%. By how much? So 4.5 minus 3.5, it's larger by a whole percent.